Since a few days, I've been seeing this UI that's been really popular. So here, as you can see, we have a bunch of cards, and when you hover, they basically, some of them sort of pop out. And now if you also notice, they're not in a flat view. They're sort of in an isometric view, which is a little bit of challenge if you want to build this in front end. But when I tried it, it was a bit difficult, but not much. It was a fun. So let's see what we have. So here, as you can see, we have bunch of cards, all with different colors. I could have built them as a crate card or so, but then I felt that would be more like an overkill for this video. So here, what I did is I basically have them as color palettes. So here, when you hover, you can see that we have different colors. And when they hover, the one that you actually hover basically pops out a bit more. And then you have the previous one popping up and then also the next one. You also have the color name, the hex code. It's it's really nice and really fun. And then when you unhover, they sort of bounce. So it's almost identical to how this effect is. It's going to be fun. So let's learn how to build this. Now, before starting, the source code list is in the description, so you guys can download and play with that. If you like this video, make sure you comment down. And yeah, without delay, let's get started and let's learn to build this. So here I am in my index.html file, and I have some CSS, HTML, and also a little bit of JavaScript. Now, let me just show you what we have in the browser. So here, as you can see, we have sort of a chopped off card showing up here. Now, if we look at the HTML for this, so we have a container which holds the card container. And then inside of that, we have the actual card. Now, the card has a red color with a translate none, rotate none, scale none. And then inside of that, we have a color name and the hex code, which is these two. And then if you look at the styling for the actual card, there's just height, width, border radius, overflow hidden, border top, flex, um, flex layouts, stuff like these. Nothing too complex. And then we have a before element just so that we can have a bit of black sort of overlay. And then this is the styling for the color name and the hex code, which I don't think should matter much. And then the container, which holds which basically holds everything, has this transform translate x of -100 pixels. Now I'll be going in detail why we have this -100 pixels. So basically this is just to reposition the entire layout a bit on the x-axis, and yeah, that's basically what it does, nothing else. And I think, yeah, because of this, we basically have this card sort of chopped off. Anyway, so this is the basic thing that you need to style the card. Now, the way we have here in the Pinterest video, wherein the cards sort of are in a perspective view and then sort of in an isometric view, I would say. So for that, what we need is these two properties. The first is perspective. So we need a perspective. So let's just set it as 1000 pixels. Now to set the perspective, you have to set the perspective to the card container, not the body, not the container, but the card container. And then we have this perspective origin. Now, what this perspective origin lets you do is, with the help of this, you can position at basically how you want to see the actual card, whether you want to view it from the top or whether you want to view it from the bottom. So here the X is as 50%. You can set it as 0 as well. It doesn't really matter. But then since we want the view to be from the top, so we have this as -229. Now, if you look at the card here, we don't see any changes. The reason for that is, even though you have these two properties in here, to actually have the card sort of uh, in a way that's in the design is to have the rotate. So here in the card, I can come here and I can add rotate, or maybe I just add transform, translate, and we're gonna rotate in a y direction. So we're gonna have like 25 degrees. Save. Let's refresh. Oh, oh, so we have here translate y now. So we need rotate instead. So rotate y, save. And now, as you can see, it is sort of in the same direction as these cards. Now, let me just remove this so that you can see it a bit better, or maybe make it positive 100. And maybe also add a translate y. Hmm, it's pretty weird. Let me add a bit of padding file. Okay, so this is how a specific or one individual card would look. But then if you look at the other cards as well, they sort of stack. Now, if we have the same card here, and if I just repeat it like a few times, this looks something like this, which is not how we want. So the thing is, we want all these cards to sort of translate underneath, or basically translate Y. And then also what we want to do is we want them to not just come down, but to also like move in the Z direction. So to do that, what we have to do is for each next subsequent cards, we're going to translate it down by, let's just say, this is the first one. So let's just keep it as is. The second one can be by 10 pixels down. Third one can be 20 pixels. The fourth one can be 30 pixels, so on and so forth. So basically, based off the index of each individual card, we can just pull them down a bit. And then also, based on their index, we can also translate them along the Z axis as well. So that's basically how we're going to have the layout for the card. So I'm just going to be removing these stuff because we're going to be inserting the cards using JavaScript. So I'll just be cleaning these up. Okay. So now we have the empty screen. So here we already have some JavaScript code. So we have a container which holds the container, a cards array which is empty in this case, and then we have a color palette when we have a bunch of colors. So we're gonna render these colors as the cards. Now, if you have seen the final one, there is two animations. I mean, two things that we need here. The first one is the way we basically have each individual cards transformed or have them positioned. The second one is how on hover we have those cards animate. So here what we're going to be doing is first let's just get so basically let's just get the card count, like how many cards we have. And then let's start off by building the get transform function. Now this, let me just close or disable this cursor. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be getting this transform property of each individual cards. So this is going to take the index and then the y offset. Now, why do we have this y offset? Because we're going to be using this same function when we animate. So if you have seen the demo, when we hover, each individual card basically pushes itself upward along with the previous and then the next one. So here we need the y offset value while we use this in the animation function. So if you just want to position it, you don't really need it. So we just set it as default as 0. So we get the index and then we use this index to have or build this style. So we have rotate as 25 degrees, translate y and translate z. So translate y is going to be based off the index. We're going to multiply it by 10. And then if you have any offset, add that up and then set it as pixels. And then since we also would be basically moving it along the z-axis as well, so base of the index, multiply it by 0.5 and then that many pixels we need to set it um, as along the z-axis. So this function is to get the transform. Now let's also skew it a bit just so that it looks exactly like how the design was. So we're just going to be skewing it along the y-axis by -1 degrees. Now this is going to be hard-coded for all the cards, so we won't be changing it based off the index. So it's just going to be as is. Now we're going to have our animate cards function. This animate cards function would take basically the index, the y offset, and then an ease. Now, if you have seen the design, as you know, when you unhover, it basically goes to its original place, but then it has this cool sort of like a bounce effect. Now, to have this effect, we're going to be passing in the ease, and then here by default, it's going to be power to out, and that's basically going to be the default one when you don't provide any ease. But then when it comes to its original place, we want to have a specific ease. So we're just going to have it here if you want to add anything. Now, the next thing that we're going to be doing is creating a variable for the positions. Now, if you have seen the demo, what we're doing is we're basically grabbing onto the card that is being hovered, and then the card just before that, and then the card that is just after that. So we're going to be having index -1, and then index +1, and then the one that you actually hover is index. And then for each of these cards, what we do is we grab their position, which is basically these, and then also the index of this specific loop. And then for the cards in position, what we do is we add gsap.toAnimation, and then we have the card's position, we have the duration set, we have the ease. If you basically add any ease, it would be set here. If you don't provide any, this power to out would be the default one. And then what we want to do is we want to transform that specific card. So to transform it, we just use the same old function that we just built just a few minutes ago. So we have this here. And that's basically what we have to do. So we have our get transform, which basically lets the cards basically position. Then you have the animate card, which basically takes in the position of the cards and then takes the offset, and then uses this get transform to translate or transform the cards that you just hover. Now, all we have to do is run a for loop. Now, the length of the for loop would be till card count, like basically however many hex codes you have here. So we're going to be just running off that many times. You create the card container. So for each individual card, we're going to be having a card container. You add the class name. You create the actual card. You give the class name. You transform it. Now, since each of the card also need to be transformed, so we have here get transform, and then we just pass in the index of that specific card. And then for the background, we just set the background of the card as base of the index. We grab onto the hex code from the object. And then we have the color name and then the hex code, same as this card background. We append the color name and the color hex to the card as a child. We take the card, append that to the card container as a child, and then take the card container, append that as child to the container. Let's save. And now, as you can see, we have our cards showing up pretty nice. But when we hover, they still don't animate. Now, to animate it, you need to add the event listeners. Also, I haven't really pushed the cards inside of this card container. Cards empty array. So here, I'm just going to be pushing in the cards. Now, why do we need this to be inside of the cards array? The reason for that is when you hover, you need to get the specific index of that specific card that you just hover. So we're just going to be storing that in an array. It's going to be making our lives way easier. Now, what we do is for each individual card container, we add a mouse enter event. Whenever the mouse enters the card container, we're going to fire off a function. And then whenever it leaves, we're going to fire off another function. So when it enters, we want to trigger the animate cards. We give it the index of which you hovered. And then we add the translate Y value. So the previous one will basically go up or basically push itself up by 80 pixels. The next one would also push itself by 80 pixels, but then the one that you actually hover would be by 150 pixels. So in the same way, we're going to be just doing it for the mouse leaf, but for the mouse leaf, all of them would be 0 since we want them to be in the original place. Now, if you remember, we also had the ease in function. So here we'd also pass in this ease of back out of 1.5 seconds. Now when I save, you can hover, looks nice. And then when you unhover, you just have this cool sort of bouncy effect. So this is it for this video. I hope this was fun. If you guys want this as a component, I feel like I will make one. So I'll probably be adding this in my UI library as well. Now, if you guys haven't checked my UI library, the link of that is in the description. So it's a basically React and Next.js based library. So I'll just add that in the description so you guys can go and use that in your projects. So yeah, the source code of this would be in the description as well. So you guys can check that out as well. So yeah, that's it for this video. Meet you guys in the next. Till then, bye bye, take care, and peace.